Okay, I finally got around to this. What we're going to do today is look at the adaptation that someone made to mount a Mikuni carburetor with the standard enclosed throttle cable that the early Sportsters came with. A member sent me his set of handlebars. These are original Buckhorn bars. You can see the slot in the bar, and that's where a piece rides that travels back and forth as you open and close the throttle. This is a Harley-Davidson original bar, the right side handlebar. The mechanism for the cable inside consists of the throttle cable, which is this piece right here. It has the barrel on the end with a hole in it. It has a set screw right here that clamps the cable down. Now, this barrel here is part of the internal throttle cable. It's simply a piece of coiled cable housing like you'd find on a lawnmower, and this barrel piece is threaded into it. It's tight on that cable, on the cable housing. And then we run the length of the housing, and we come down to the end of the throttle cable housing. Then there's an adjuster that screws in and out, and there is the 90-degree elbow that comes on a Mikuni carburetor. It doesn't come on the carburetor. Actually, this piece, I can give you the part number on it, is a piece that can be purchased separately. However, I think because of the fact that this inner cable will not pull through that elbow, and that's because of the crimp put into it when it was bent. On the newer elbows, they're sold as separate pieces, so there's probably a full curvature through the turn that would allow this throttle cable to be inserted in this end of the elbow and go all the way through it. This is the original end for the Mikuni braided throttle cable that you would get with a Mikuni carburetor. So our challenge here is we want to see how this is hooked up in place of the solid wire that was used on the original Harley-Davidson throttle cable. Originally this bar had a piece of solid wire like you would find on a lawnmower encased inside of this housing, excuse me, and that would push and pull and open the butterfly on a Bendix. Well, with a Mikuni carburetor, it's a throttle slide. It's a round slide barrel in the carburetor that has to be pulled up to open the throttle, and to close the throttle, you back the throttle off and the throttle closes. What makes this work is the fact that inside that Mikuni there's a large coil spring above the slide, and that's what gives it the pressure to close the throttle. Otherwise, if you had this flexible cable, it would never push to close as the original did with a Bendix butterfly carburetor. So, we have a set screw in the barrel, and that holds that cable in place. The length of this housing, all the way from one end to the other, that's the outer housing, the length of that is 37 5/8 inches. Now the length of this braided throttle cable that came from the Mikuni carburetor, the length of that internal braided cable is 45 inches. So you might want to take note of those numbers. Those dimensions are good for a handlebar setup that is the standard Buckhorn. If you've got large ape hangers, it's going to take a longer cable and a longer housing. If you have short, like drag bars, it'll probably take a shorter housing and a shorter cable. The cable housing can be shortened by simply taking this bead off the end, taking the inner cable out, and cutting it with a pair of cable clippers. Whenever you want to cut this braided cable, you also want to use cable cutters. And I'll show you a picture of those in just a second. these are Knipex Bland. Yeah, Knipex Bland brand cable cutters. Part number is 9511165, and they're made in Germany. I would only cut cable using this type of cutter. It'll cut it cleanly. There is another tool made by Parks Tool Company for bicycle parts. You could get that. It's a Parks cable cutter. It comes with a blue handle, and you can get that at any good bicycle shop that sells the tools. So again, that's what you want to use to cut cable or to cut housing on this throttle. Now, the parts are made up of the throttle cable housing, the inner throttle cable, the barrel, the handlebar set. This is a spiral grip with a groove, a spiral groove cut in it. This particular grip, you open the throttle, and when you roll the throttle on, it pulls the inner cable, which pulls the slide up. If you had this on a Bendix, it would work the same. If you were trying to do this setup using like a Tillotson carburetor, then you're going to have to buy another slide that goes in the reverse direction, so that when you roll the throttle on, it pushes the cable instead of pulls it. And those are big differences between a Tillotson and a Bendix or a Mikuni or something that requires a pull to open. A Tillotson requires a push to open. So those are big differences. Either of these grips in either direction are available. The last part of this is a pin and two bushings. The pin drops into the hole, and it bottoms out in the hole. And your first bushing goes on here and slips all the way down against the barrel. Now, this bottom bushing rides inside of this slot. So I'll put it in here backwards. And again, I've put this in backwards. I will drop the pin in the hole. I will drop that bushing on there, and you can see how that travels in the slide up and down. Now, I'll put this second bushing on here. It goes on the top, and it winds up being flush, and where this bushing rides is inside the groove cut into the throttle grip. You probably can't see that, but that is a wide groove in there. So when you put this on, it'll feed on and rotate like that. There is a screw in the end of the throttle that screws into the end of the handlebars here, and that's what holds the twist grip on. So with it installed, when I pull the throttle to open the throttle, it will pull this in this direction, pulling the inner cable, opening the carburetor up. So I just wanted to show that detail to you. If I can get this out of here. So you insert everything for the throttle cable. It goes in this end first. That's the easiest way for me to do it at any rate. You see the groove in this bushing. What we want to do is to move this up into position to about this position. Now the cable would be inside the handlebar, but there is a set screw that's threaded in a hole in the handlebar. That's a little threaded plug. What we want to do is to line that groove up with the hole so that our set screw goes down in like that. And that will tighten. I'll just put the screw in here so I don't lose it. That will tighten on the barrel, and it'll keep the housing from moving left to right the way you're looking at it. So with that secured into place, this is, as we turn our twist grip, and again that pin would be riding in this groove. As we turn our twist grip, it's going to open and close the throttle. So I haven't tried it yet, but it looks very workable to me. This set screw, it's only on one side, and it's really crammed, tightened tightly against that cable. If it were me, I'd probably put a little silver solder on the end of that braided cable before I put the screw in. But this works too. You can see that it wants to kink out just a little bit. You could bend that back to straighten it, but it's really of no consequence whatsoever. I can understand now how this would fully work, and the person that made this adaptation was thinking pretty good, because I have long given up on trying to use the enclosed throttle cable with my Mikuni carburetor. So as a result, I'm running a Bendix carburetor most of the time on the bike, because I just love the enclosed throttle cable. It's not hanging out in the wind. It's the cleanest look you could want on an iron head for the handlebar setup. So I look forward to putting this on my bike, and I'm going to just use the cable setup because I've got basically the same handlebars on my bike, and I'm going to mount that on my handlebars, and I'm going to hook up the Mikuni, and I'll probably do another short video showing how that works and how that goes together. Okay, that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and I'm sorry it took so long for me to put this together.